Okay, good evening. Welcome to the first Ember.js Meetup in Koblenz. I'm proud to have Kasper here, all the way from Copenhagen.
Yeah.
So, start with your talk about Ember.
All right, I will. All right, thank you, Stefan. And hello, Germany. First of all, congratulations on winning the World Championships. That was amazing. We had nobody left to cheer for, so it's like, yeah, come on, Germany, and you won. That was amazing. I wonder if we can borrow some of your players for the next cup, but we probably can't. Okay, so Ember.js, thank you for having me, first of all. I haven't been to Germany at all as an adult, so it's an experience for me, absolutely. So who am I? My name is Kasper Tidemann, or Kasper Tidemann. I'm a software developer. I got my own company, and I like to code JavaScript and Go for the moment, at least. Yeah, I like to be nice and drink beer. My story, really short, is that I started out as a developer in Copenhagen, and I quickly came to realize that going to San Francisco would be like a fun thing to try. So I did that, and I've lived there for, I don't know, 3 years in total or so, and talked to a lot of the awesome and funny and very friendly JavaScript and web developers in Silicon Valley, so they're great. I also do blogging, occasionally anyway, on my Danish blog. So maybe if you've Googled for stuff regarding Ember.js, you've stumbled upon a blog post that I wrote, or maybe not. I actually started out developing a CRM system. So that was like a classic Ruby on Rails thing. That was way back when Rails was still Rails 1 point something. And so that's really what got me into the whole web development community, and I still have and run that company. Just so I want you guys to know who I am. My favorite editor for the time being is Atom by GitHub. So I take it now you know everything about me. No. I want to start off really quick by talking about where we are at the moment in the web world and on the internet in general. It's a big thing to try to evaluate, but let me just grab this. Oh, no, yep. That's pretty much where we started, at least with the browsers and all that. And I Googled funny photos from Windows 95, and they apparently made a DVD with the Friends cast back then. I really liked that. But anyway, a lot of you probably know, and you probably used Netscape Navigator 1.0 and compiled your own Mozilla and all that stuff. That's where we started. That was back when you asked for a web page and you got some HTML back, which you still do. But at the moment, right now, I saw this video a few months ago and it really blew my mind. Apparently, some developers from Mozilla developed this subset of JavaScript for implementing the Unreal 4 engine in JavaScript using canvas elements, and it works completely amazing. And I was like, oh my God, that's crazy when I saw that. That's really, really crazy. So yeah, so we went from Netscape Navigator all the way to having Unreal 4 running and actually working in the browser. That just blows my mind. It's crazy. So where does that leave us in general? Well, a lot of places. Unreal 4 doesn't have anything to do with Ember.js, but let's talk a bit about it anyway. In case you wonder, the mascot is actually Tom Dale, as far as I know anyway, one of the lead developers, and he usually wears big, thick black glasses, so that's the inspiration for the logo. So this is taken straight off the website. Ember.js is a framework for creating ambitious web applications. So web applications is really what should be in bold text on the website, not ambitious. Because if you ask me, it's about developing web applications. There are a lot of things that Ember is not necessarily the best tool for, but in some situations, it's a magical, completely fantastic tool to develop stuff. So I talked to Stefan and asked how much experience you guys have, and some of you have fiddled a bit with Ember.js, some of you a lot, and some of you nothing at all. So let's just start at the basic principles. This may actually be a bit different from what the core team would tell you. I just attended a conference in Copenhagen where Eric Bryn talked about components and whatnot. We can get into that a bit later, but I want to talk about the core concepts the way that I see them. So, and I will exemplify all of this in a moment. Ember.js is built upon a foundation of routes, templates, and controllers. That's basically it. You don't need models, but that's what goes into like a basic thing. So there is the concept of a router that takes care of the URLs, and the concept of templates that are shown based on the URL that you see, and the concept of controllers that can somehow manipulate the data that you actually show in a template. And so I'm going to show you an example in a moment, but the point is, so you have an app, I guess, and it displays some URL / Koblenz. That gets when Ember.js initiates on a web page, and it has that route. It initiates the Koblenz route that you see up there. And what happens is it picks that up, and due to the like auto magic in Ember.js, it loads the corresponding template with the same name. That happens to say, welcome to Koblenz, today is date. And date stems from the controller. So that just returns new date.getTime. I should have updated that because that just returns the epoch that I formatted that. But anyway, the point is we have some sort of URL, we have some templates, and we have controllers that feed data into the templates and make things appear magical. And so Tom Dale likes to emphasize this a lot, the fact that the URL is a single source of truth in an application. And that's right, but I'm not going to delve so much on that fact, but we just need to keep in mind that the router takes care of turning URLs into state. Which is, by the way, if you look at this on like a lot of web pages that are JavaScript enabled, that rely heavily on JavaScript, they do typically break if you try to go back and forth and even like close windows and whatnot. They do typically break. So this is a powerful concept in itself. But anyway, once you hit some route, be it / Koblenz or whatever, the router takes care of invoking controllers, the views, and it makes the templates appear in the browser and whatever you've glued into the entire layer. We all know templates, I guess, at least from a server-side rendering perspective. You probably know ERB and those types of things. Yeah, exactly. In Ember.js, templates contain, well, the HTML to show, of course. It's all client-side, of course. And it uses what's called handlebars for templating. So the showing of properties and stuff inside a template is powered by handlebars and soon to be replaced by HTML bars. I don't know how much you guys have fiddled with client-side JavaScript, but I want to emphasize the thing here really quick. And you can ask me about this later on, after when I'm done, if you want to, if you've run into this problem. The problem in general with client-side templating is that it's very slow, because string concatenation is slow in JavaScript. It just takes forever to concatenate a bunch of strings and then show it or put it in the inner HTML of a div somewhere. That takes forever. And so the web development community as a whole, because this is not an Ember.js specific invention, at least not that I'm aware of, but the web community as a whole came up with the idea of using what's called the virtual DOM, like document fragments, using the browser's ability to piece together DOM that is eventually to be persisted into the actual DOM. Use that instead of basic strings because it's way faster. So the point I wanted to make is Ember uses handlebars right now. The virtual DOM idea is way faster, and that's coming pretty soon. So that's the templating part. And we got controllers. Okay, so programming, I know people have got a lot of different ideas and opinions about MVC and whether models should be thin or thick, or controllers should be thin or thick, or whatever. I don't really care, but in Ember.js, the controllers are typically instantiated by the router. So if you hit up the Koblenz route, it initiates a Koblenz controller. And even though you haven't explicitly typed it anywhere, Ember.js will still instantiate that controller for you and take care of the context that goes with that route. I'll show that in a minute. And the controller is just a place for working with the things that you see at any given route in your application. So all of this is great, but let me just show you a brief demonstration of how things work. And so I need to exit this. And I need to, yeah, so that works, right? Yes, it does. Okay.
Can you use a bigger font?
Yeah, of course. Does it work? Should it be bigger?
As big as possible.
That's all right, right? Yeah, that's fine. So I don't want to step through all the code because that would take a long time. But anyway, the point is, when you actually want to do something with Ember.js, what you need to do is, of course, have the basic header stuff. Title is not necessary, but anyway, you have a header, and then from then on, you have pretty much just script tags, depending on when you want to load stuff. The things I have in my example are available on GitHub. I'll give you the URL in just a moment, but let's start by looking at what Ember, how it's all pieced together. First of all, what Ember needs is, it needs jQuery, and it's not a hard dependency actually, but it's just what it uses. And it needs handlebars. So you need that in order to use Ember.js. So including Ember.js in itself is not enough unless you've packaged it in some meaningful way. You need jQuery, you need handlebars. Then you need Ember itself, of course, and then you are likely to have some sort of application. The name, of course, doesn't matter, it's just app.js here. From then on, you have a bunch of templates. And the first one is the base route template. So that's the index template or application view. I don't know what they call it, but that's what it is. So that's the first thing that you see. And you'll notice it has some content, and that's really nice. But you'll notice the concept of having an outlet. I don't know why they chose that word, because I'm used to a yield or things like that, but they call it an outlet apparently. We got two other templates in my example. We got the one named Koblenz, displaying welcome to Koblenz, and today is date with the handlebars syntax for showing the computed property. And we got Neuwied, I guess that's how you say it, showing what the time is. So this is a basic, very basic Ember.js example code-wise. Let's just see how it looks before delving into the app.js really quick. So, all right, refresh. I could have done more to spice it up, but I didn't, so bear with me, please. This is the application view, the root of the application that we're building. And the root of the application is defined by not being slash forwarded by anything. It's just the base route of the application. So we got link tos. These are helper functions to help you link to different parts of the application, different states of the application. Ember.js has got a lot of helper functions. Link to is not the only one, but as you can probably tell, this links to the route called Koblenz, because that's where it is, and the other one links to Neuwied. So let's try it out. So we click there. It says welcome to Koblenz, and the time is right. The date is right, or we click there and it just shows us the current time. So this is a very basic example of an application. And they just got the following right. They just got this right. It honors and it doesn't destroy state. So it actually recreates wherever we were in the application when you go back and forth. I gotta say, I don't use the back button a lot in my browser, but anyway, it makes perfect sense because this is it's the same way you wire up everything else in Ember.js. So that's a simple example of an application. Let's just briefly take a look at the code. I've read a lot of feedback from people saying that Ember has a very steep learning curve. I experienced that in the beginning too. I think it has changed a lot with the recent, not just the recent, but with the changes that we've seen over the past 2 years or so. Because all this application really is it has an application like a namespace that just resides on the window namespace because we're opening this in a browser. And then it has a router. And you'll notice that it routes to Koblenz and Neuwied, but it doesn't have the root route, what's shown when just accessing the application, the root of the application. That's because it's implicit. So Ember.js is influenced a lot by the Rails community, I would say, with a lot of sensible defaults and a lot of sensible conventions that has you not need to type this .route index. So you don't need to do that. It does that for you. Then we have a controller. That's the first controller. Again, you don't need to instantiate them, but if you do, you can actually put in code there so they become useful. And so all this does is it defines a property called date that returns formatted time. This is actually not the best example of a property because it doesn't rely on anything. Because the whole idea of computed properties is you can distill some sort of value from other values that change over time. But anyway, that's contained in the Koblenz controller. Then we have the Neuwied controller, and as you've seen, if we access that route, the time changes. So tick, 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 tick. What happens here briefly is, once this controller gets instantiated, it calls the function tick that happens to be defined on itself. And the tick just sets the current time that we get from the Moment.js library. I don't know if you've used that, but I think it's all right for handling time. And then it sets a timeout that ticks itself again. So this is not like atomically super correct. Chrome sort of stops ticking the time after 300 seconds or so. But anyway, this is just an example. If the browser is not active anyway. But what this does and what makes the time update automatically is this concept of computed properties. So there is a time property here that relies on the clock variable on the controller. And what that means is every time the clock variable changes, then the time function computed property gets executed or re-evaluated, and then it returns the current time. So as you can see, this ticks every second and sets the clock, and then this returns, the time function returns the actual time. And that's what makes the entire thing just tick and tick and tick. This is a contrived example, of course, but working with computed properties and bindings in general is such a relief compared to, I don't know about you, but I've been working with jQuery for 1,000 years or so, and implementing all this in jQuery is just tedious at best, I think. So and then the last stuff is just Vue implementations that happens to add the JavaScript animation magic when the elements get inserted. So that's not really that interesting. But as you can see, this is just a simple example showing changing between routes, showing computed properties that gets updated every second, and so on. So let's get back to the presentation. Does this still work then? I guess it does not. All right. So that was a brief Ember.js sum up. But of course, there's way more to it than that. There's a model layer, or an object layer anyway. Ember's got its own model abstraction. Mix-ins for sharing code between different everything in principle, controllers and everything. Helpers, bindings, components, and so on. I don't know if you guys have worked with web components before, but that's not widely supported in all browsers. So there is an approximation made by the Ember.js core team, the components thing, that's really neat. It's just a really neat way to work with partials, if you're familiar with that from Rails. So I put up some example files on GitHub. I will, because that URL is long and whatnot, but we'll put it up on the Meetup page. So giving you a general introduction to Ember.js, let's talk a bit about who uses this, because that's pretty relevant. It's being used by a lot of companies, actually. Basho uses it for their React control. I don't know if you use that database, but if you ever need a fault-tolerant distributed key value store, then React is the shit. Zendesk uses it for their entire UI. Yahoo, no clue. Travis, you know. Square, you know as well, perhaps. It's a huge payment solution in the United States. Groupon and so on. So a lot of companies use Ember.js. I want to say here real quick, what do these examples have in common? Because that's an important thing to keep in mind. All of them have in common that they are applications. So they don't just show content, because that's a whole different ballgame. They're applications, and they're made for interacting with the user, not just presenting content. So that's such an important point, because the problem is, if you develop something in Ember.js or React or Angular or whatever, any one of them, you'll come to find that Google indexes exactly nothing from your URLs, because, well, it used to not execute the JavaScript on the web page. So none of the text that eventually shows up once the JavaScript application gets loaded actually gets indexed by Google. I've heard it's changed, but I don't know. But it's important to keep in mind that if you want the discoverability, the ability for people to discover whatever you've developed on Google, you need to keep this content thing in mind. And you need to keep in mind that perhaps rendering server-side and throwing it all away isn't such a bad solution, even though it sounds completely crazy. So, why should you use Ember.js? There are a lot of frameworks and tools and libraries out there right now. You've probably heard of most of them. You've probably heard of Ember.js, and as I just said, React, Angular, Mithril, Mercury, Vue. I mean, I don't know how many there are, but there are many of them. I think you should use Ember.js because it's got very, very sensible conventions. If what you do fit into the way that it works, if what you do can be fitted into the idea that there is a URL and everything persists all the way down and reacts upon URL changes, if your idea fits into that, then it's really, really plausible to use Ember.js. You should use it for the same reason, because then what you'll experience is a very rapid development phase. That's at least what I've experienced. I mean, that example there with the changes and all, it took 2 minutes to code or something. Bindings and everything is extremely helpful. If you've ever encountered or worked with scenarios in which you get data pushed to the client, at some point you want to reflect this in the UI. It goes without saying that using computed properties just makes it so much more easier to reflect data changes instantly at the moment that new data arrives on the client. For instance, for a live score site or, I don't know, stock site or something like that. It makes perfect sense. And to be honest, you should use Ember JS or something similar anyway, because you don't want to implement all of this yourself. I started 4.5 years ago. I developed my own framework and I got it working with the back button and all of that. But believe me, it took forever. And what you don't want to do is you don't want to fiddle around with checking for changes in the location bar all the time. You don't want to build an entire framework. You want to build an application, hopefully. And if that's what you want to do, then Ember JS is a pretty solid choice. So thank you. And if you have any questions regarding all of this, I'm not really sure of the planning, but if you have any questions regarding how do I make very long lists of data behave correctly, or how do I do this and that, please ask me, because I've been developing a whole lot of Ember JS, and yeah, I might have some input. Anyway, thank you.